That's where a deal is made or broken. That's where you get the feeling of a culture of an organization. That's where you're looking the people in the eye and asking questions and getting to know the people that you're going to be working with every single day for the rest of your time at that firm. This is potentially a multi-million-dollar asset that you have here, and I've seen more light bulbs go off positively or negatively than anywhere else. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. This is Corey Whalen, managing partner of Bridgemark Strategies, and lucky enough to have Jeff Nash, the CEO and co-founder of Bridgemark Strategies, on as well. Me and Jeff combined have probably helped over 1,000 financial advisors do their due diligence, take a look at the marketplace, and help them find the firm that's best for them. And over that time, we've seen probably every mistake possible that's out there, including one of my financial advisors 3 weeks before their transition. Their attorney had the same name as their branch manager, and they sent their draft of their resignation letter to their branch manager instead of to their attorney. So that's definitely something that you don't want to do as a mistake. But me and Jeff just wanted to talk about some of the mistakes that we see happen over and over again, to make sure that you learn from them as you're going through your due diligence process, and make sure that you're just making the best decision possible when you're looking around. Jeff, thank you so much for your time and hopping on today.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks. Hey, I don't know that I heard that story. That's a great story. You know, one of my funnier stories also, and I've been doing this for 25 years now. I go back to 1999 where I've been doing this, was an advisor was leaving. It was actually Edward Jones that he was leaving, had a new office set up, and the UPS driver knew that he had a new office set up, but knew that he wasn't in the office. And literally it was a smaller town and delivered a whole giant package to his Edward Jones office, just because he knew he wasn't in the right look where he was going to be. Of course, his BOA found out, everything kind of fell apart and he got termed right away. He made a great living, though. He had a huge amount of success. He was pretty set to go, but it was just a UPS driver that tipped the scales for him as well. So it's always about trying to make the smart decisions is clearly what we try to help people with. But there's some interesting stories that we've seen over our years, I'm sure.
Yeah, as I said, we've probably seen everything out there in the industry. The first thing that I see a lot is financial advisors making a decision off of the likability of a recruiter or a branch manager. They go through this process and they make really good friends and close relationships to either, one of those two. And because of that, they start ignoring some of the potential red alarms out there and maybe reasons why they shouldn't join a firm. And they wind up making a decision purely on likability from a recruiting standpoint. And it makes sense. A lot of people make a decision off and they do business with people they like. But in my opinion, as you're going through the due diligence process, make sure that you like the right people. Make sure that you like, instead of the recruiter or the branch manager that might not even be there the whole length of your note, or a recruiter is pretty much gone right after you join a firm, make sure that you like the service people, the leadership of the firm, the people that you're going to be working with every single day of your life over the length of time at your firm, and maybe not those recruiters. You have anything to add, Jeff?
Yeah, I do. There's an expression that I came up with a few years back, and then actually I used it so often I went out and trademarked it. And that expression was feel, fit, and financials. And what I've found from just again helping scores, hundreds of advisors over the years, is they're not exactly sure how to evaluate and how to compare firms. And so when we think about feel is about culture, it's about alignment, it's about philosophical, it's about goals. It's also about likability. And we always say likability is table stakes. You got to like the people you're working with. It's just that you can't make your decision on likability. And you can't exclude the other factors that can be even more important than just likability. To your point, right? You may not be working with these folks much longer than just the recruiting process. You may not be working with these folks, even if in the branch manager world, branch managers move around a lot. And while it's really important to interview and understand and like that branch manager, they move solely joining a firm based on the branch manager without understanding what could be how business is being processed, right? It's really about your clients that you want to prioritize in that decision-making process and what's going to be important to the client, from a product, from a suitability, from a business process, from a technology. There are all these tools and resources that all too often I think advisors take for granted. And so likability, absolutely table stakes. I would almost never make a decision based on likability alone, but you definitely have to, I do agree, you got to like the people you're working with. That's an important component to the decision process.
For sure. And on the other side, I would say a lot of times financial advisors will potentially pass on a really quality firm, maybe because there isn't likability with the recruiter and they find it a little hard to do business with that person. And they might wind up missing out on a really good opportunity, just focusing on likability of the wrong people.
Yeah, it's a great analogy as well, right? It's a great example as you talk about that. There have been many occasions where I've curated firms for advisors and that first call just doesn't go well. And so often when that first call doesn't go well, the advisors just completely ruled it out, even though that's literally a recruiter representing the firm that they may never have interaction with again. It just quickly gets discounted, and a lot of times as a consultant, we have to work backwards to help them understand, no, this firm is checking all the boxes that you've told us to look for. So you have to unwind that initial conversation and that lack of likability in the recruiter in that process. Yeah, it's a likability is clearly important. I stand by that, both the favorable and the unfavorable. But it's all in the evaluation process when you're looking at changing firms, because advisors, I think, don't do it often enough and they're not exactly sure what are the things to look for. It's way overemphasized just the likability of a single person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The second one I would probably say is the most common mistake. It's just financial advisors making decisions off of upfront economics. Sometimes they have a really hard time differentiating, the pros and cons on when a financial advisor is doing this by themselves, and they'll just pick the firm with the largest, upfront economics. I'm working with a team right now. They found a firm that nailed everything from a feel, from a fit, from a financial standpoint, and they were 99% going in that direction. And then all of a sudden, another firm came out of left field that is giving them an extra $100,000 of upfront transition assistance. And all of a sudden, they're starting to rethink their process. And while $100,000 seems like a lot of money, over a 10-year time period, after you take out taxes, you're looking at maybe 60 grand over a 10-year time period. So you're potentially, once you take a look at the numbers, you're potentially making yourself go to a subpar firm for $6,000 per year in after-tax money.
I've seen that as well frequently, and I've seen it with not just six figures of $100,000 difference, but seven figures of $1 million differences, and multi-million dollar differences. And I would stand by the comment that what I've experienced from a lot of advisors over the years is those advisors that focus on just the upfront economics first and only look at that. There are those advisors that really, I would say, need that money, and that becomes an important part of the decision-making process. But I think realistically, what happens is firms that lack feel, that they're not properly aligned, and most importantly, they lack fit, where their business and the way they process and handle business is not properly aligned in what the advisor needs. They're going to try to mask that with bigger checks. And I think that's what happens is the advisors then get tempted with the bigger check and say, I can make this work. And the reality is you shouldn't be trying to make things work just because it's a bigger check. You end up losing in the long run. And we've seen countless advisors lose clients through this. You could almost set your watch to it where it's 3 years later where we see advisors really unhappy that they've taken that upfront check, which is then a 10-year note. And they're literally trying to figure out how to unwind that, how to pay it back. Can they get another note from somebody else to offset it? Meanwhile, it's really hurt their business. So for you and I, when we see every day is those upfront economics, it's the easiest thing for an advisor to compare. Likability is number one, and then the upfront economics is number two, without taking full consideration into what are the ongoing economics, what are the succession economics even, right? When you have a business that has a value, what is the value of that business at one firm versus another firm? And so there's a lot more, of a broader discussion around economics than just upfront. But the one thing I would caution, and the biggest mistake I see people make, it really is about looking at upfront economics as a replacement for, or as a offset to something that can't be done. And that's really where you get into the big mistakes of don't just settle for the upfront economics. Use economics as a negotiating ploy, right? Use it as a tactic when you negotiate. And it's okay to then use one firm against another firm as you kind of looking at two firms that you really like, trying to differentiate between the two and having an economic discussion to use that differentiation. But I'd say, really be careful with what the upfront economics can be and firms that will give you more money to offset what would be deficiencies.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing to consider, Jeff, is that money is very emotional. I mean, I went through it
Yeah.
myself in a past career before I was an independent consultant, but I was looking at job offers and a firm gave me money that I just couldn't refuse. I mean, I was thinking about how I could potentially, pay for my kids' college education or pay off my house or go on like these amazing vacations with my family. And while I was thinking about all of those things, I wasn't focusing on some of the red alarms, some of the cultural fits, some of the things like I wouldn't be able to do that allowed me to be successful in my own job. And I think that's a big thing that we do in the process as well, is just help take emotions out of the decision, and help financial advisors focus on what's really, really important so they don't make an emotional mistake.
Yeah, I think there's no question. I would even take it a step further. It's a sounding board, right? A financial advisor often has their spouse to talk with about this on the emotional front, but a lot of times the spouses aren't involved in the business. And so it's hard to talk to them about the business decisions that are also connected to the emotional decisions. And that sounding board of just comparing and contrasting and being in their corner is something that I've enjoyed about what we do, is really helping them and being able to really make a difference, to really let them share their thoughts as well as us kind of offsetting what their thoughts are with highlighting pros and cons in their decision-making process. And that's when you can really have that conversation with somebody about economics and the emotional ties to the economics versus what are you offsetting with that, right? What are you giving up or what are you gaining? And those are really important conversations to have. And advisors really need to have those conversations, right? That's ultimately when you change firms, you're looking to make a change for the better. You want to improve something. And whether it's your technology, your tools, your service, your compliance, your products, whatever it is, your entrepreneurialism, your independence, you're looking to go from one place to the next and not go backwards. No one's looking to go backwards. And having that evaluation and having a resource to actually talk through, when you think about when you change firms, your best source of information is the recruiter representing that firm. Your second best source of information is a friend who either may be at that firm or a wholesaler, and none of them really are looking out for your interests. And it's really where a consultant can come in with an agnostic approach to really help you kind of compare and contrast and really think through the pros and cons of that decision making.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the third thing that I wanted to talk about. I think this happens a lot more when financial advisors are doing this on their own and exploring firms, but maybe they have a friend that they greatly respect that was at their previous firm that made a move to another firm, and they're a raving fan. And whether it's because they trust and respect that financial advisor or they're trying to save time and disruption in their business, they kindly blindly follow that financial advisor, over to the other firm. But I've talked about this in other videos before. Everyone has different wants, needs, and goals. I mean, think about how many times a friend has told you, man, you need to go see this movie, or man, you have to go to this great restaurant, and you wind up going to either, and you're like, that wasn't really that good. It's because everyone's opinions of different things are different. That's pretty low stakes when you're, spending $50 to go to the movies or a couple $100 to potentially go to dinner. But with a multi-million dollar asset like your business, it makes sense to make sure that you are really exploring if that firm is not just a good fit for your friend, but it's a really good fit for you and your clients as well, and spending that extra time.
I've had some of my best referrals, and this is not meant to be self-serving at all, even though it may come across that way, but I've had some of my best referrals coming from million-dollar producers that I've helped move. And instead of them referring their friends to go to their firm, they've referred them to me. And occasionally they end up going to that same firm, but frequently, and even the referrer says, hey, I'd love for this person to be over here. There are synergies, there are things we can do together, but I want them to go through the same process that I went through to really evaluate. And more often than not, as it's just the way it happens, they don't go to the same firm, and it's because they have different interests. And it really comes down to priorities. When you evaluate a firm, there's everyone can say there's a top 10 list. There's probably 50 different things on that top 10 list when you're evaluating a firm. And if you then weight those 50 different things and said, okay, I only want to focus on the things that are 10 out of 10. Now you may have 10 things that are a 10 out of 10 of importance out of those 50 items. And the other piece to that is there's not a single firm, including the incumbent, that's going to have what would be a perfect score, a 10 score on those 10 different items. So it's really a complicated kind of formula when you think about how do you decide what's important for somebody versus someone else, and how does the firm support that? Well, and that's some of the kind of the process and the work that we do, is to really help advisors understand where firms are strong, where they may not be as strong as it relates to what becomes important to them and their priorities.
100%. 100%. The next mistake that I see happen a lot, I don't think financial advisors understand the actual time investment that it takes to go through due diligence when you're exploring, 3 to 5 different firms. There's lunch meetings or WebEx meetings. There's technology demos. There's economic phone calls. You're doing WebExes to explore all the aspects of that broker dealer that are really important to your business. And a part of the way through the process, you see financial advisors just kind of trying to cut corners and not digging in deep enough with questions that are really, really important to their business, whether it's financial planning or reporting or marketing or compliance, whatever it is. I was on a call with a financial advisor and a broker dealer a couple months ago. Social media was really, really important to this advisor. He wanted to take his business to the next level from a growth standpoint through social media. And he basically asked one question about social media. Do you have the same social media capabilities as all the other firms? The recruiter said yes. And he was just about to move on right to the next portion of the business. And we took a step back and asked literally 12 different questions about what they could do from a social media standpoint. How long is the approval process? Can they do video? Can they do LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever it is? We did like 12 different questions, and it wound up being that, that firm wasn't it wasn't a good fit. But I think a lot of financial advisors get fatigued throughout the process, and they start cutting little corners like that and wind up having a facepalm moment, I like to call it, when they move over to a firm and they're like, man, I really wish I asked that question.
Yeah, I mean, it really does happen so often. I mean, I think about the different touch points an advisor has with a broker dealer. And, there's the service side of things. And I hear from a lot of advisors, I've got an administrative support and they deal with all that, and it's really not all that important to me. I think, and yet still we'll have a lot of advisors, they'll talk to a service environment, they'll look at the technology, there's kind of some table stakes that many advisors tend to do. I think there's a lot of things advisors actually, when you say cut corners, to me, one of the most active touch points between a broker dealer and an advisor, and this is among W-2 firms and 1099 firms, is compliance. and you have more direct and indirect contact with compliance on a daily basis at every firm than I think every advisor even recognizes. And when you're doing due diligence, overwhelmingly, advisors don't even think about adding compliance onto their agenda and talking to somebody in compliance.
Yeah.
And it really is, that's an area that absolutely, to your point on social media, it's not just having the conversation with compliance, it's then drilling into the way you do business and the tools that you're going to want. And it's not even the way you do it in the past, it's the way you might be looking to do it in the future. Here are the things I've never been able to do. Can I do these things here? Because I have friends that might be able to do them, and they're at a different firm, and so it really is not just having the conversation, but really digging into the compliance. And that's just an example of where you really have to spend a lot of time, because that's where you get that oh my gosh moment of I just made a bad decision. And I'd say the other thing that advisors can do is while you may have a friend at a firm, is talk to references, talk to other advisors who are at that firm. My experience is advisors never lie to each other. Even the ones that are happy at their firm, they'll tell you about, if you ask the right questions, they'll tell you about their pain points. Just because someone has pain points doesn't mean it's a bad firm. It's really about just being aware of where those pain points may lie.
For sure. So this next one is my personal pet peeve, and it's financial advisors not going to the home office visit. They've probably spent 40 plus hours of their time at this point exploring different firms, narrowing down options, and some financial advisors will be really, really hesitant to fly out to the home office visit, whether it's because they don't want to spend the 36 hours away from their business, or they feel like they're going to get in like a high pressure type of timeshare type of situation where they're trying to close them in a locked room, or whatever it is. They have some hesitations to going to the home office. And in my opinion, that's where a deal is made or broken. That's where you get the feeling of a culture of an organization. That's where you're looking the people in the eye and asking questions and getting to know the people that you're going to be working with every single day for the rest of your time at that firm. And you wouldn't even buy a $50,000 car without going to the showroom and looking at it and taking it for a test drive. Once again, this is potentially a multi-million-dollar asset that you have here. And I've seen more light bulbs go off positively or negatively in home office visits than anywhere else.
Over the years here, so I've been in my own company with Bridgemark here for 10 years. And I would say I've probably been to maybe 20 or more different firms. So I've really had the opportunity to visit a lot of home offices. Sometimes they've just flown me out, and sometimes I've flown out on my own. Sometimes I've gone with advisors. But I've had an opportunity to see a whole lot of different firms, from large firms to small firms to independents to RIAs. And what's really interesting, what you just said, is it's very true. They all have their own culture. And when you go in there, and they all say this, right? Everyone says, hey, we're different, we have a different culture, et cetera. And it's one of the hardest things to define as an advisor when you compare firms, because the recruiter will literally say the exact same thing. How many recruiters have anyone heard them say, hey, we have a great culture and we have great technology? And a lot of recruiters say that exact same thing. And what you see when you go to a firm, and it's almost not even as much as what you see, it's what you don't see, right? What is the firm showing you? Well, they're showing you their best resources, their best, not even people, but the departments that they really shine. And what are the things that they're not showing you? And when you compare two different firms, if you go on two different home office visits, you'll really start to see a comparison and a differentiation between the firms. And it's so important to spend the time. It is time well spent, and I would even say the last thing about it is, for those folks that are looking to make a change of firms, part of what you're thinking about is what are you going to say to your clients? And there are clients that won't even ask questions. They'll just say, hey, no problem, sign the paperwork, and that's the end of that. But there are other clients that may ask you, and certainly your larger clients may ask, hey, how'd you pick this firm? And so it's really beneficial to say, well, I started off working with a consultant. The consultant helped me curate some select firms based on what the business is, the way I handle my clients, et cetera. And then I went and visited the firm and spent time really meeting the people. This is what really helped me to convince me that this was the right firm for me. And when you have that full story to your clients, it really goes a long way. So Corey, I totally agree with you where the home office is really important, but I would also add, you really will see a difference between different firms and how they present and how they really just approach the business. Even though it's the same business, they approach things differently.
Yeah, I was talking with a recruit probably 6 months ago from Wells Fargo that wound up recently moving, and they said, Corey, if he just had a brand new child, and he said, Corey, my wife is going to kill me if I'm gone for 36 hours. And I said, when your wife is going to be really upset is when you go through 4 months of work to make a transition, and then a year in, you figure out you're at the wrong firm and you have to do it again for another 4 months. That's a lot less than 36 hours of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've lost some clients in the interim as well.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. That's a great
So
list though, Corey, of what you've got of as you talk about things of work that advisors should be doing, really just make it to help them make a smarter decision. We spent some time talking about, what are some main areas there.
yeah, I mean, really the self-serving one is, just not using a consultant. Just advisors don't understand how many firms are out there. I always explain it as like a cheesecake factory menu size of options. There's hundreds and hundreds of options. And Jeff, me and you are constantly researching the industry every single day. And even us, we come up and find new opportunities that are popping up every single day. So if you're an advisor that's running a business and taking care of your family at night, there's just no way that you could keep up on all of the options that are out there and get a true understanding of the offerings that are out there without having a conversation with a consultant.
It's so true. Just literally the other day, Corey, you introduced me to a new firm. I think they actually looked at one of your podcasts or YouTube videos and they reached out to you and you reached them. You had me speak with them. I had a great conversation with them. I'm not going to give details about the particular firm for this call, but really unique story, really successful, that success that they're having. And we now have a new agreement. We've got, as a firm, probably 130 different agreements with firms, and we've talked to probably 300 different firms over the years, and it's still just a drop in the bucket of the available choices that are out there. And the other thing it's interesting is when we look at this on a rolling 2-year basis, which is how I measure this, we've had advisors that we've worked with that have joined over 35 different firms. And so there's a collective knowledge, a collective learning that we're out there in the marketplace every day looking at firms, but we're also out there in the marketplace every day talking to advisors who are evaluating those firms, who are negotiating those firms, who are getting deals from those firms. And so there's just a lot of learnings that are good consultant. And so while this may be a self-plug, the reality is a good consultant can help an advisor looking at the marketplace and help improve their decision making and help them avoid making mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. I really hope this is helpful to everyone. If you have any other questions on the general landscape or making a transition, we have plenty of PDFs of questions that you should be asking and other coaching things we could do to make sure that you streamline this process as much as possible, avoid more mistakes, and make the best decision you possibly can in the limited amount of time that you have. I really hope that this helped. Jeff, thank you so much for your time, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, Corey.